So I will not read from my prepared text. However, as I share with you some thoughts on the topic of peace, you will see that this is simply a further elaboration of the very fundamental points that were made this morning. There is no doubt that peace has been the object of our desire and of our heart from the beginning of our time. However, in spite of this fact, when we look at our world today, we see that we have fundamental difficulties in attaining this very deep desire within ourselves. And we should ask ourselves the question, why? Why is it that in spite of all our efforts, in spite of all our desires, still we are so far away from attaining this goal? In order to do this, first let us read the definitions that we have been given in the dictionaries about peace. There are basically two definitions: a state of mental or physical quiet, tranquility and calm, and freedom from war or civil strife. These are the definitions that are given about peace. If we look at these definitions, we see that we have neither of them in our world today, nor indeed we ever have had that kind of physical, mental, quiet, calm, and tranquility. And the nations of the world, even those nations that are not at war, still they are preparing for war. Their guns are aimed, their missiles are aimed, and their resources are focused on creation of the machines of war. In 1978, Stanovnik, who was the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission, noted, and this is in 1978, that since the Second World War, 199 wars have been fought in the world, that 350 years have been spent on fighting them, that 69 countries have been directly the theater of a war, and that no fewer than 81 countries have been directly or indirectly involved in these wars. And this was only between 1945 and 1978. The situation since then has deteriorated dramatically. So the best way that we can define our world today is that we live in a world that has peace at a gunpoint, and no better than that. Now, if that was the only problem, we may allow ourselves to rest, but there is a second issue that is very important, namely that our world today, there is a prevalence of violence in the name of love. As you know, in many countries, especially in North America, most of the murders take place in the homes, take place by the people who, quote, love each other. Many of wars are fought in the name of love. Love of one's nation, love of one's religion, love of one's language, of race, or whatever. We have created an atmosphere in which violence is committed against other human beings in the name of love. So on the individual interpersonal relationship, there is a very far distance from the goal of establishing peace. And in the international arena, the situation is not promising also. Now, having seen these two pessimistic conditions, there is another phenomenon at the world today which is very optimistic. In the world today, there is a rise in the consciousness of humanity about peace. This rise in the consciousness, this increase in the awareness of the people, of the groups of people everywhere in the world, has far greater power than ordinarily we think they do. Historically, when we study the history of mankind, we will see that the major changes that take place in the world of humanity are due to the changes in the consciousness and awareness of people. Toynbee, the historian, observes, he says that during the disintegration of a civilization, two separate plays with different plots are being performed simultaneously, side by side. While an unchanging dominant minority is perpetually rehearsing its own defeat, fresh challenges are perpetually evoking fresh, creative responses from newly recruited minorities, which proclaim their own creative power by rising each time to the occasion. The drama of challenge and response continues to be preferred, but in new circumstances and with new action. Shoghi Effendi makes a similar analysis of the present conditions of the world when he observes that in the world of the humanity today, there are two processes at work. There are the process of destruction, which manifests itself by the activities of those who are in the positions of power and authority and strength, but nevertheless focus their activities on those efforts that eventually will result to some kind of a destruction. And then the processes of construction of a new world order, of a new society of mankind, a new race of humanity. This time spiritualized, this time much more attuned to its own fundamental and basic noble reality. Now, having observed the situation of the world today in these two ways, we now may ask ourselves, what is the nature of peace and why accomplishing peace is so difficult? There is a similarity between peace and happiness. As you know, all people seek happiness. As a matter of fact, in some parts of the world, pursuit of happiness is considered as the right of every individual. But happiness has the quality of being elusive. Happiness is a fast runner, and doesn't matter how fast you pursue it, it is always one step ahead of you. And that's the reason that we have created a society so fast, so moving, everybody going and running and running and running, and you stop them, where are you going? What are you seeking? And they say, we are pursuing happiness. And of course, the answer is yes, I saw happiness around the corner. And they go around the corner, and there's yet another corner. And this is the state of affairs in the world today. Why? Because happiness cannot be pursued. Happiness is a state of being, a condition of human life. If you reflect, you will see the moments that we are the most happy are the moments in which there is a unity between our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Conflict arises in us when we feel one thing, we desire, we know another thing, and we do a third thing. This schism in the human being, this dividedness that takes place within us, causes unhappiness. When there is unity between our spiritual qualities of knowledge, love, and will, when that unity exists, then we experience profound happiness. Having said that, then we may ask ourselves, is there such a prerequisite also for peace? If happiness has a prerequisite of the unity between our thoughts, feelings, and actions, between our knowledge, love, and will, is there a prerequisite for peace? And here comes the statement of Baha'u'llah, which is most apt in this respect. Baha'u'llah observes that happiness, that the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. From a Baha'i perspective, it is not the peace that we should pursue, rather it is the unity that we should pursue, and as a result of that unity, peace would be ours. Now, the concept of the unity is both simple and complex. It is simple because we all have some experience, some knowledge of the phenomena of unity. We all have experienced unity at several levels. The unity between ourselves and our spouses, in our families, sometimes in our nation, between our religious groups, our ideological groups, our political groups. There are small unities here and there, or bigger unities here and there. So we have some idea of unity. The unity, however, that we have not yet accomplished, which is the prerequisite for peace, is the unity of whole mankind. That one we haven't come yet to attain. And we have reasons that we haven't done that are several. The paradigm of unity, the mindset of unity, requires several conceptual understanding. The first concept in this relationship that we have to understand is the concept of oneness. You know, science and technology has brought us together, has made the distance to be almost non-existent, has made communication very easy, has allowed us to share our sorrows and our joys, if we want to, as members of the family of mankind. But we as individuals still insist on the differences rather than similarities between ourselves. still see the superficial differences as being the fundamental proof that the oneness of humanity doesn't exist. Whenever we think of oneness, we are talking about the realities that are one, and we usually are not aware of them. Several examples would help. The example one is the oneness between people. Because in the essential reality of our being, we are one. From a Baha'i perspective, the world of humanity is like one organism, and we are each like cells and organs of this body of mankind. And as such, therefore, the health or the illness of one part of the body affects the whole body. The joy and the sorrow of one affects the whole body. It is no way that we can say that we do not care about one part of our collective organism and still stay in a state of health and peace. It is impossible. There is a fundamental oneness between people of the world. Another oneness is the oneness that exists between the spiritual realities and the scientific realities. In the area of scientific realities, we don't have any difficulties. Whenever a scientific fact is discovered, we all abandon our previous notions and say, yes, this is true. The scientific truth is one. However, we have difficulty to see the same dimension of oneness in respect to our ideologies. From a Baha'i perspective, once again, the spiritual truths, the truths about human morality, about human integrity, they are also one. The differences are the differences of perspective, of differences of understanding, the levels of understanding. But there is a fundamental unity between the spiritual realities and scientific realities. These realities, these examples of realities, would allow us to get a better understanding the notion of paradigm of unity. There is one other example of unity that I like to mention, and that's the concept of unity of God. We all have gods. Gods of science, gods of religion, gods of nationalism, gods of internationalism, gods of different ideologies that we have, gods of pleasure, gods of self-denial. There are many gods. And it is the God or gods that we have without even realizing that we have it, that give meaning to our activities, give direction to our life, make us to do what we do and live the way that we live. However, there is also a reality about oneness of God. The God that all humanity, all of us, yearn for. Even those of us who are agnostic, even those of us who do not acknowledge the existence of such a reality, nevertheless, we all yearn for enlightenment, for justice, for love, for knowledge, for brotherhood. And when we speak of God, we are speaking of all of these qualities to the ultimate level, the level that mankind would strive for ever and ever. Now, these are some of the concepts about unity that we have to, oneness, that would help us to understand the paradigm of unity. But paradigm of unity, the notion of unity, wouldn't be completely understood if we do not take into account the true nature of a human being. Floyd Matson observes something which is very interesting. He says, if it is true, in general, that ideas have consequences, then man's idea about man have the most far-reaching consequences of all. Upon them may depend the structure of government, the patterns of culture, the purpose of education, the design of the future, and the human or inhuman uses of human beings. These fundamental issues about human nature should encourage us to reflect what is our idea about the true nature of a human being. What do I think about my true nature? The prevalent concepts about the true nature of man are the concepts of man as an animal, man as a machine, and man as a creation of God, but with limited options and opportunities. These prevalent concepts, none of them really do justice to the spiritual nature of a human being. Whenever I speak about spiritual nature, whenever in the Baha'i writings we speak about the spiritual nature, we are referring to the reality that a human being is in possession of the ability to know, the ability to love, and the ability to will. That our knowledge, love, and will would determine the kind of activities that we do. Or if our knowledge is enlightened, we use our scientific experiences one way. If our knowledge is not enlightened, in another way. If we have love of peace, we do one kind of activities. If we have love of war, we have another kind of activities. If we focus our will in the causes of construction, there is one result. If we focus our will on the causes of destruction, there is another result. So the human reality, it has capacity of being angelionic or satanic. And that is up to us. It is us who make that decision. The third concept that we have to reflect upon in order to understand the paradigm of unity which Baha'u'llah speaks of is the notion of the coming of age of humanity that Dr. Krause discussed with such eloquence, and I really don't need to repeat it. What he said is that if we look at the world of humanity, we see that mankind collectively goes through the stages of maturity as an individual does. Therefore, you have human societies that function at the level of adolescence, function at the level of adulthood, childhood, or adulthood. From a Baha'i perspective, the world of humanity, the nations of the world, the civilizations of the world have never reached beyond the level of adolescence. They have come to some of them to level of adolescence. And then the adolescent period, being the kind of a period that it is, without the necessary guidance that it did not have, without the prerequisites that they had to be there, these adolescent societies succumbed to the two most powerful forces operative in the adolescent individual or nation, namely the forces of aggression and the forces of indulgence. And these forces of aggression and indulgence resulted in destruction of those civilizations. Read about the fall of the Roman Empire, or the Persian Empire, or the Egyptian empires, or other empires that we had. And we will see that when they fell was the time that they have, as adolescent societies, succumbed to the forces of indulgence and aggression operative within them. From a Baha'i perspective, a new era has arrived in the life of humanity. This is the era that we are achieving. We are at the threshold of achieving age of maturity of mankind. We are an adolescent world. The world today is an adolescent world. The rivalries that are there, the competition that is there, the tremendous fascination with indulgence on the one hand and aggression on the other hand that is there. This world is a world of adolescence. And we now have to reflect upon the requirements of the world of adolescence. What are we going to do with an adolescent world? An adolescent world needs guidance, needs awareness, needs new ways of thinking, so that it can start thinking as a mature society. And this takes us to some of the prerequisites for creation of a united world. The paradigm of unity, therefore, not only requires the awareness of these things, but also we have to see what are the issues that are required to create a united world of humanity. Now, there are several issues that I like to mention in this respect. Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha have stated in their writings that the world of humanity would not be able to establish its peace until the equality between man and woman has been established. Abdul Baha says that he likens the world of humanity to a bird, and the bird has two wings, and the two wings are the wings of men and women. And he says not until there is equality between these two wings of humanity, the bird of humanity would not soar to the heavens that it ought to. This situation has created a tremendous problem at all levels. Abdul Baha says, as long as women are prevented from attaining their highest possibilities, so long will men be unable to achieve the greatness which might be theirs. He furthermore says, the happiness of mankind will be realized when women and men coordinate and advance equally. Now, there is another challenge before us as far as peace, and this is the challenge of science and technology. It is really puzzling that the science and technology so far has been used to create the technology of war. I give you again some data. The data that I give you is from 78, and since then has been almost doubled. In that time, $20,000 million, $20 billion, were spent on finding new ways to kill men. 50,000 scientists spend their time to find new ways and techniques of killing men. Since then, these figures have gone way up. I like to propose here that we now have to start developing technology of peace. But how are we going to develop a technology for peace? Technologies of war, we know. Technology of peace, how are we going to do it? It seems that at the core of the problem about creating a technology of peace is that we have not owned our own knowledge. We have created a distance between ourselves and our scientific discoveries. We act as though the scientific discoveries that we have made are not ours. that the machines that we have created are more powerful than us. We go with dread to deal with the machines that we have created. Now, the fundamental reason for this state of affairs, it seems to me, is that we have not focused on our true reality. Allow me once again share with you the Baha'i concept of a human being. The Baha'i concept of human being is this, that the true reality of human being is his rational soul. Rational soul in the Baha'i concept means our power of understanding. Whenever we speak of the soul of human being, we are talking about the qualities of understanding, of knowledge, of love and will. Okay? These qualities makes us a human being. Medically speaking, whenever we say an individual is dead when he has lost his consciousness, his awareness. When the self-awareness goes, then the person is dead. When the brain, which is the site of it, is dead, then we are dead. Okay. This human awareness, this human soul, uses the human body as its tool. Therefore, this hand becomes the tool of my reality. And this eyes becomes the tool. And the whole organs of the body becomes the tool of the human soul. Now, the soul of a human being, if it's a misguided soul, would use this hand to fire a gun. The same hand can be used by the soul, if it is enlightened, because of love and peace and security. This eye can behold beauty and oneness, or can look at differences and ugliness. The human body is the tool of the human soul. Now, this human soul, this power of understanding, doesn't stop there. This power of understanding decides that it wants to see more. So it creates a microscope. The microscope becomes an instrument added to our eyes so that our reality can see more deeper. It creates a telescope. It creates an airplane so that we can move from here to wherever we want, faster. It creates a telephone as an extension of our ears. All the things that we create, these are the instruments, extensions of our body as an instrument of our soul. Of all the things that we have created, the most far-reaching of all of them so far is the computer. The computer is an extension of our brain. So that we have this computer, so that we don't preoccupy our mind, our creative forces, with doing monotonous things. We allow the computer to do that, so that our mind would become free to become creative, to reflect upon new realities, to discover new realities, to create a different kind of a world. Therefore, this technology that we have, this science that we have, they are all the tools of our soul. The challenge before us is the challenge of refining, of enlightening our souls, of way of thinking, of our awareness, of our consciousness. By doing that, then we would be the master of what we create, rather than allowing those technologies that we create to become our masters. In the paradigm of unity, therefore, we would be able to create technology of peace once we have enlightened our awareness, once we have created a new mindset. And by doing that, we create a different situation. Now, one may ask, one may say that these ideas are utopian in nature. They may say, look at the history of mankind. Look at all the wars that they have been there, all the injustice that is there. They say, look at the humanity today. And for Baha'i to say something that, they say, look at Iran. Look at what they are doing to your people in that country. As you know, since the inception, the appearance of the Baha'i faith in 1844, the Baha'is in Iran have been subject to persecution. Some 24,000 Baha'is so far during the last 14 decades have died, have been killed. Now, because Baha'is, through the teachings of Baha'u'llah, are not allowed to carry arms, to get involved in conflict, to fight, and to create circumstances of that nature, because of that, these individuals all have been killed, one by one, without being in the position of really having any kind of aggressive, violent response to those activities. Now, one may say that this is odd. What is the purpose of the Baha'is in Iran right now allowing themselves to be killed? The Baha'is in Iran who are in prison now, more than 150 of them have been killed, close to 200 so far. There's close to 1,000 Baha'is are in prisons in Iran now. And these are, many of them, friends of many of us in this hall, some of us in this hall. These individuals only have to do one thing in order not to be killed. They have to say, no, I am not a Baha'i. If they say that, they wouldn't kill them. They would glorify them. They would give them homes and jobs and show them on television. We all want to be on television. And they do that. Okay? But these individuals don't do that. The question is why? What is it that results in this process? Is it fanaticism? Well, Baha'is should not be fanatic because Baha'u'llah said that science and religion should be in harmony with one another. That you just simply cannot be fanatic. So if it's not fanaticism, what is it? Allow me to divert a little bit here and share with you some thoughts about our thinking about ourselves in the course of history. This wouldn't be a comprehensive review, of course. But you see, at the beginnings of our appearance on earth, we as human beings perceived ourselves to be the center of the universe. As the centers of the universe, we were very happy. We thought that the moon and the sun and everything, stars, revolve around earth. We thought that the earth was the center of the universe. We were the king of the earth, and we were sitting on that throne, really happy. And then came the Copernican revolution. And the Copernican revolution dethroned mankind. Suddenly we realized that the earth was not the center of the universe with the sun and everything going around it. It was the other way around. That was really upsetting. Now, as though it was not enough, some years later, this man walking in the jungles, looking at the bones and this and that, scratching his head, reached to a conclusion that mankind comes from the same stock as animals. That we indeed, when we look at our physical being, we are very, very much similar to animals, and there is an evolutionary process. His name was Darwin, in case you don't know, and he created a blow, a second blow to man's identity about himself. Not only we have been dethroned as far as our earth is concerned, now we have been dethroned as far as our supremacy over the created things are concerned. Then came about later this man who started, you see, we, however, prided ourselves and said, we are conscious people. We make decisions. We are aware of what we are doing. And this man came and said, I'm sorry to tell you, but after studying the dreams and the slips of tongue and this and that, I have bad news for you. And the bad news is that our unconscious has enormous power over our consciousness. And many times the things that you do and you think that you are doing is the devil inside you that makes you to do it. Okay? He gave the devil another name, he called it, but it is the same. Okay? So we have been going around always and we have been saying, the devil made me to do it, not knowing that we were thinking like Freud. And we were genius, but that's a different thing. Okay. So he took away that. That was the third blow to our identity as human beings. Then we move from there to the next situation. It was an era of the enormous development of sciences. There was an enthusiasm in the minds of the people. They were saying that the era of the relying on the opium of the masses and the religion and this and that is gone by. We are going to have science. We are going to be logical. We are going to be reasonable. We are going to solve all the problems of mankind. We shouldn't worry about it. Science was supreme. And then came the First World War. And we shocked ourselves about our own true nature because of the atrocities that we did with the technology that we developed. As though that was not enough, another blow came in the Second World War. Here, we have said, okay, we are social animals. If the technology doesn't work, at least we can create organization. We can have laws. We can say to people, this is the law, international law, that kind of law. We obey those and these kind of situations. But it was a supreme example of organization that made Holocaust possible. It was an organization of a nature that took away the responsibility from every individual. Every individual said, it is not my fault, it is somebody else's fault. I am just doing my job as I have been ordered. These blows and other blows of similar nature has been coming at mankind. And now suddenly, at this juncture in our life, we find ourselves totally doubtful about our own selves, about our own integrity, about our own capacity for peacefulness, our own capacity for love. We have arrived at this era totally unsure about ourselves. Scientists, in order to understand human beings, study the mice and the dog and the fish. That is true scientific activity that we have. We do not any longer study human beings and the true realities of we have. It is in this situation that Baha'u'llah comes and says that mankind is created noble and spiritual in its reality. That the fundamental reality of a human being is the nobility of a human being. That fundamental goal of mankind should be to bring about that nobility. Now, how are you going to bring about that nobility? You are going to bring that nobility first and foremost to accept it and to believe in it. So what happens between the Baha'is who are in prison in Iran and those who want to kill them is a dialogue. Is a dialogue whether a human being is noble or ignoble. When the prosecutor says to the Baha'i to say, I am not a Baha'i, he is saying, say that mankind is not noble. Say that human beings are basically violent. Say that human beings are basically unjust. Say that human beings are basically worse than animals. We want you to proclaim that. And the Baha'i says, I cannot do that. Because if I do that, I deny my reality, your reality to the persecutor, and everybody else's reality. If indeed my understanding and my belief is about nobility of man, then it is worth it to give everything that I have to prove that. Because after all, any major task that we have in our lives, we have to sacrifice for. And we have to stand for it. And if we don't, then we pay a much, much heavier price. It is remarkable to read some of the last wills and testaments of the Baha'i martyrs in Iran, because they talk about oneness of mankind. They say, I am going to die in 2 hours, as you know, to their wife and children and so forth. As you know, my only reason, the only reason that they are killing me is because I'm a Baha'i. But I will be glad to die because it is for the cause of nobility of mankind, for the cause of oneness of humanity, for the cause of bringing mankind once again to realization of its true reality and nobility. This is the drama that is at work. And it seems to me that the most fundamental task between us as human beings at this juncture in the history is to say that, yes, unity of mankind is possible. I'd like to say one other thing and stop. You know, dear friends, one of the major prerequisites for establishing unity one of the major prerequisites for establishment of peace is that we know how to use power. Because in our world today, there is an abuse of power. Historically, power has been used in one or two different ways. One is the authoritarian mode of use of power. Authoritarian mode of use of power simply says, I obey whoever is above me, you obey me. And the most important thing is the law of obedience. This kind of a personality, this kind of approach is a very rigid approach. It is an approach that doesn't allow for anything else. Power becomes the primary source of security of everything for the individual or the nation. It is in response to this mode that we also developed another mode of using power, namely the indulgent mode. For the indulgent person, pleasure is the primary thing. Either some people want to have power to feel secure, others want to have pleasure to feel secure. These are the two predominant ways of uses, really abuses of power in human affairs. In the age of maturity of mankind, we are going to be oriented not towards power, not towards pleasure and gratification, but towards love and unity. With that kind of a situation, we would indeed create the condition of unity between people, which is prerequisite for establishment of peace between the nations of the world. Thank you very much.